Eric Carlson.
Steven, how are
Hey,
you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm just in a conference room where the wireless will stop. So if you just lose audio from me,
If I lose audio, I'll just launch into my Eric Carlson impression,
that's a good
and
idea.
I'll just do, interview myself, and I don't think anybody will catch on.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, no problem. I haven't been doing the impression. This is actually the voice of Eric Carlson, Propelics Partner, joining us today to talk about Enterprise Mobile 101 and what it takes to get started in enterprise mobility. All right, here we go. Hello and welcome to Device Squad, the enterprise mobility podcast from Propelics. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propelics. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propelics is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propelics clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propelics' menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propelics offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. Eric Carlson is a seasoned leader with a keen eye for emerging technologies. He's highly respected in technical and business circles for his ability to match technological geekiness with business know-how to achieve unique solutions. Having guided many startups through successful exits, Eric has the experience to advise clients on the discipline and objective approaches needed to turn ideas into reality. That's how you give an introduction.
That was delivered quite well.
Well, I'm a trained professional, Eric. Okay, where to start here? Start with a definition. Enterprise mobility is the art of driving qualitative and quantitative business benefits through the transformation and simplification of business processes by delivering mobile solutions to employees, partners, and other constituents.
Yeah, so that definition, we built that a little bit ago, and I'm not really in love with it too much. I'm not sure if it exactly encompasses all the things that we do in enterprise mobility, and obviously there's a lot more to it than just that simple kind of high level type of thing. Obviously, the discussion that we were having was related to a webinar that we targeted at organizations that haven't done much yet. Really, 2 different target organizations. One that are on the sidelines a little bit and want to be able to start thinking about enterprise mobile, but haven't yet taken that step, or 2 organizations who have done some work and maybe have developed some things or have purchased some things and are not seeing an ROI, or they're not just seeing excitement around it, and it's not driving anything at the organization. So this idea of bringing it back to driving qualitative and quantitative benefit, like what are we doing this stuff for? And it should be clearly tied to something that's meaningful. And usually for us, that meaningfulness comes from the transformation and simplification of processes. That's where a lot of the stuff that we've done in mobile has always had the biggest impact, is looking bottom up. And so from there, we were talking about why does mobile matter and does it matter? And I think one of the things that organizations first need to define is, why does it matter to their organization? Because I'm sure there's organizations out there that it may not make sense in some sort of sense, or it might be organizations where the use of that technology and some of that transformation might not line up to the users that they have.
And so what process do we use to determine when mobile is worth pursuing?
We were just having this conversation before this podcast, and we're working with a client who is getting ready to deliver a presentation to a prospect, and that client has been pretty successful in enterprise mobility, even though they only have a small collection of apps. Like there's only 4 or 5, they're a large retailer, there's only 4 or 5 apps that are in that portfolio, and they're delivered towards, right now, really towards a district management type of situation where you have a lot of people are very mobile and trying to manage 10 to 15 to 20 stores, and how do I use the information I have to do that? But the benefits that came out of that strategy, even with 4 or 5 apps, is huge. And anyway, so we're talking about it, and he used a term that in relation to the prospect that they were looking app down. And it's an awesome term. Like it's just really good that it's a really good way of thinking about it is a lot of what we see is this kind of, whether it's related to the market or this kind of app, there's an app for it type of idea, or something that it's this idea where there's just 1,000 little apps available. I'm just going to figure out which ones I want to take and plug into my business, and it's going to be mobile. And that app down philosophy, and kind of our philosophy, is to really look bottom up and look at what people are doing, where are they spending their time, what tasks are being done, what's value add and what's not value add, and try to find ways to really go after those non-value add tasks in a way first, and give people time back, and then use that benefit and that momentum and that excitement to then build things that really affect those quantitative, qualitative matters, like other metrics that matter even more than time, although time's pretty good, but even things such as maybe it could be revenue, or it could be growth, it could be reduction of shrink, it could be employee turnover percentage, whatever those types of things are. But how do you kind of work up this idea of starting bottom up versus app down?
Can you talk a little more about time savings as a metric? I mean, are we talking specifically about gauging how long it takes employees to do tasks currently, and then showing how we can save them time by performing these tasks, instantaneously with mobile, or is there more to it than that?
No, I think it starts with that. I mean, with the ones that we always started with, and trying to look like when you do day in the life type situations, or other types of things. And it really depends. I think it depends on the business and the user group, and the kind of the target user audience for those use cases as well. Time is not necessarily one that makes a lot of sense with specific types of resources, and I'll come back to that. But for the most part, what you would see is that people who are in very mobile type of jobs, who might have a mix of home office or at office, as well as outside of the office types of tasks, usually trying to find things that allow them to be more effective in the field, and allow them to be to do things that are more important. There's usually a long list of things that get in the way of that, and it might not be very obvious. It's the reason that we, like, as you've talked about a lot, is we do day in a life type situations, or we do ride-alongs, or we do other types of things to see where they're spending time and what effort is happening. Like, what are they, if they're going to appointments, what are they bringing into those? How much time did it take to prep those types of things? If they are getting into review, like in a retail setting, to review store, what are they doing to prep that data to know who to talk to and what to talk to them about, and those types of things. And usually you start looking at how they spend the time before those moments, usually is a good way to start looking at use cases. I think it's funny because you had this idea around micro moments. And the funny part about, I think, around enterprise mobility, it's actually the hours and hours of stuff that you do before that moment that sometimes are the largest benefit in identifying where those moments exist. So it's not the micro moment of me walking into a store and being able to have sales data there is a good benefit. But if you look back and say, I might be able to do that today. What are the 35 or 50 tasks that have to happen for me to be able to have that type of moment? Instead of starting at the app side and saying, all right, I want to be able to provide this metric, I got to look and see what are they really working on to be able to get to that point. And what are the tasks and the process and the paper and the other types of things that happen to get to that point. And that's been a good way to at least start with. And then time's good. People like time back. And it's like, it makes people happy. So if you get rid of mundane tasks and just garbage throughout the workday, you get happy users. And then when you have happy users, then they're more willing to try new things, or have more faith in new applications, or think differently around processes, because you're not trying to solve the world with one app. You're trying to be able to give back these specific types of things.
At an extremely literal level, one of the first projects I worked on with Propelics was the the indoor mapping app. And that app literally was saving every employee time every day because nobody could find their way to their conference rooms.
Right.
And then one simple app solved all that.
Yeah. So when we did that workshop, we did an ideation session with every group. Actually, that might have been the project before you joined, but the way that app started actually is that we did an ideation session with every group within this organization, and they had retail and like kind of operations, right? They're not necessarily a retailer, but whatever. They had manufacturing, they have QA, they have sales, they have marketing groups, they have HR, finance, right? All these different groups. So we did ideation. So we brought these groups in there, and we did like a session with them to start thinking about, are you guys thinking about mobile, and you guys have any ideas? It really was just a canvassing to try to see what groups were more ready for thinking about this. Not really app identification. It was really just, what are you guys thinking about? What processes have you guys identified? Anything, just to see if there's anything out there to begin with. And every meeting we had started 15 to 20 minutes late. Everyone. And we did, I think, 40 of those meetings over the course of 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. Everyone started 15 minutes late. And so after like the first 20 meetings, we're like, why does every meeting start 15 minutes late? And every single person said, we can't find these rooms. Like, if we're not in the room right next to us or in our little area, it's really difficult. And so this idea went to the top of the number one list because every single thing that we did was late. And it seemed like, yeah, it's kind of funny, like this haha little conference room app, right? And then we started doing the math on every meeting at this organization with 4,000 employees at one location, starting 15 minutes late, and an average of 3 or 4 meetings a day. You're talking about, you're giving an hour back daily to 4,000 people.
Right.
And that idea was a bigger ROI than any other application idea that came out of that.
Yeah, I remember that we
Right off the
couldn't
bat.
find our way to the conference rooms.
Yeah, exactly. Because it has on every building, and there's like 80 buildings in this campus, so you had to like kind of figure out where you're going. But it took us a week to figure out just like the nomenclature for the rooms, and then after that, everybody was late.
But then I remember even asking for directions to the conference rooms. We'd be like, 3 doors away from the conference room, asking somebody, and they wouldn't know where it was.
That's right.
And I don't know if you remember this, but they said that they like to change the names of the conference
right.
rooms, like
Yeah,
every
right.
year or something. So
yeah, they'd have contests, and so the whole area would. They had 10 conference rooms in their area, so the finance team would have a yearly conference to change the conference rooms names. So like every year, it was like last year's achievement, and now it's like whatever else it is, and it was just hilarious.
Yeah, we were like,
So,
okay, rule number one.
Yeah. So the app then turned into, all right, we want to be able to do a map, and I want to be able to do search, and then we want to be able to open the conference room location from like Outlook or Mail on iOS or Android, wherever that is, and then be able to say how long it would take for me to walk there. And then we want to be able to get to the point where I could do, I don't know if we were going to do notifications around it, but at least be able to inform based on walking distance from where I'm at. So it would take me, because some of those meeting rooms were a good 20 minutes away. You'd really have to know where you were going and kind of plan it out. You can't just leave like 2 minutes before a meeting. So, but yeah, then it turned into this great feature set, and then huge adoption. Like, it was their first really app that they brought out from an enterprise perspective. And every single person said, you guys started in the right location. Like, you started in the right place. This is exactly what we want. And all we did is give people back time. That was it. It was a great, it's a great, just a funny use case around it.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it evolved from such a simple idea too, because I remember we added like, we'd also like to know when the cafeterias are open. We'd like to know what food specials are, and we'd like to know when the next shuttle bus is coming so I can get on it to get to my conference room, things like that.
Right. The funny thing is that when you met with each of those groups individually, nobody brought that idea to the table, right? So you'd sit in a conference room and do ideation sessions, and nobody thought about that. Like, there wasn't really in there. But when we started bringing it up around meetings starting on time and everything else, and then you start get rallied around it. But it's one of those weird things where it's not day in the life so much, right, Steve? But it's a little bit where you have to live in the situation to understand the great ideas that are right in front of you.
Right.
Like, we had 40 meetings with all these groups, and like everyone started late, but they live with late meetings every day. That's the client thing. Like, that's what they do. They start meetings late, right? So they're like, yeah, every meeting here starts 20 minutes late. And we're like, why? Why does every meeting start 20 minutes late? And that was the reason.
Yeah,
that was the
that's
reason. So
awesome.
then it worked backwards into that app idea. It was kind of funny.
So I've heard you talk about that there are three kinds of apps: apps that transform, apps that improve, and apps that access. Can you just go into some of the differences between each of those?
We've always had this maturity curve idea of trying to find a way to classify an application. And there's an app for that idea, and clients saying, well, we do enterprise mobility, we have 20 apps type of thing. It doesn't accurately capture the maturity of an enterprise mobile program, nor does it capture the benefit of what that program delivers. So, we know of clients who might have a couple hundred apps under management/development in their organization that go to a wide variety of different users. That doesn't necessarily mean maturity, and it certainly doesn't mean value. And frankly, you're just trying to find ways to have this conversation around where is that benefit within mobility, and kind of where does that mobile matter to your organization, and what approach do you want to have that. And so we've had conversations where you might have an organization that says, well, we want to provide data access, or we want to be able to they have a set of applications, we want to make sure those are available on mobile and things like that, which might have some value, and they might be apps that we would call apps that access. So they're things that I'm not changing any business process, I'm not really changing any work with that. All I'm really doing is just saying, I have something today, and I'm going to remove the walls around the organization or the firewall and blah, 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 and be able to say, wherever I'm at in the world, I can access that same data, which is, there's good value in that. And it's kind of the base benefit of mobility in a way. And then that idea around apps and improve, we talked about things that moved a little bit forward than that. And you see that with, mobile applications that are coming from ERP and CRM vendors, or from other types of organizations that might have a larger, complex process that might be more desktop based. But I'm simplifying that, and I'm bringing out a portion of that functionality out to a mobile device to do my more consistent, repeatable processes that I don't need this large stack of functionality. I need to do these 8 things. And so these 8 things I want to be able to provide in a UI and in a way that makes them extremely easy. And that was kind of the idea around apps that improve. And then apps that transform is what we were talking about before. Like, basically, how do I rethink what we do? Do we need to capture this data? Do I need to enter this information? Do I need to perform these steps going forward, because we want to be able to work differently with mobile, not just take something that happens today in the desktop and then move that over to a mobile device. And so each of those different types of application ideas, or I guess the maturity of those application ideas, have their role throughout maybe a user or user groups or an organization's workday. So can an organization be successful with all apps that access type of idea? I'm sure they can. And that might be where they are from a cultural perspective today, and what their users are going to accept, and what they can handle from a process change perspective. And we've worked with other firms that are only building apps that transform, which is good. And you're thinking differently around mobile, but it also makes it difficult, because there might be 10 other things that I still need to bring up a PC to do, or I need to be able to do X, Y, or Z, because I haven't transformed everything I do. I've only tried to be able to transform a couple different process pieces of what I do. And so I'm kind of in this mixed hodgepodge situation where I have processes that I do that are very efficient, and I have things that I do that are still kind of quote unquote the old way. So the idea was just to be able to kind of break that off into a couple different maturity ideas, and then say, all right, as I look through a user group, to say, in looking at some of these mobile ideas, some of these ideas might be better access type of things, because maybe I don't do that very often. I just need to get access to that data, or other things I do every day that takes a long period of time. And this is a good process. It's a good cultural group to do this. It's a good benefit to think about, how do I transform this process with mobile?
I hear this phrase a lot: driving transformation. So what does it mean to drive transformation exactly?
Back to our other example around the conference room app. Sometimes when you are in a situation daily, and you work at an organization, any organization, even ours, right? And you're used to a certain set of processes and things that we do, and this is the way that we do things at ABC Corp. That transformation just doesn't come about by having a group of people in the room talking about what's happening and saying, well, we want to throw away everything that we do today, or throw away a portion of that, and be able to do that. And so that driving piece, I think, comes down to One is transformation for the sake of transformation's sake is never good. It has to be towards something. And so kind of going back to that driver set to say, what are these things that we want to be able to impact? I want to give people back time, or we want to make sure that, on a retail perspective, one thing that we always do is we want to give back time. How do we give back time? And what's the benefit of that? You have these district managers with feet on the floor in the store. So the more time that you put those people in the stores, the better the store's metrics are going to be. All these good things happen with people out in the floor. Same thing we had talked about in retail with a store manager. When that store manager's in the back room, the store always improves with the store manager being on the floor. Like that's one of those types of things. So how do you get things to be on the floor, for example? Manufacturers, examples of those types of things. So as we try to drive transformation, you have to think about, all right, if that is the benefit in my feet on the floor type of idea, how do I work backwards to say what processes are they doing that keeps them away from that structure? And how do I find ways to drive transformation in that area? It could be a challenge to just sit around and think about those ideas. And so a lot of times it helps to have third parties like us come in and help do that, because we'll ask questions around, why is this like this? Or, why does every meeting here start 20 minutes late? And kind of dig into that a little bit more into understanding what some of those core root causes are. And you have to have the right people in the room to recognize and can help determine what processes are somewhat sacred in a way, and some processes that you look at and say, there might be a reason for the reason that we do it this way, but that reason might be long gone, and kind of where to start with that.
One of the things we talk about a lot is that Propelics will help your company devise a true or successful mobile strategy. How do you differentiate a true mobile strategy from one that's maybe not so true or successful? And how can we be so confident that we will be able to deliver as such?
The strategy success is obviously built on the metrics that it is trying to go after. And what we've seen away from the work that we do, we've seen people measure success of mobile strategies based on, say, maybe the number of applications that are being built or out to the users, or the percentage of users in an organization that have applications on their device. Maybe it could be around data access. It could be, there's other metrics that people have used to kind of dictate success. And even use might be dictated as success. Well, we built an application and we know that every user logs into it every day. And that might be a basic metric to say, okay, if people are using it, maybe they like it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually driving any change, or it's actually impacting any metric in any sort of meaningful way. We've seen a lot of strategies that have been based around obviously taking things that are on desktop basis and kind of bringing them over into mobile. And just because it's on another screen, that might be beneficial from the user. You might be giving them some time back. You might be giving them that access to do something, fundamentally quicker. But if you roll all that up, the organization metrics haven't changed at all. So, it's always like we see like this example of workflow approvals as being, it's a good ERP one where, this PO gets approved, or this PO gets routed for approvals. And instead of waiting for Jane in accounting to log in and see that PO and approve it, now it's on her mobile device and she can see it and approve it anywhere, even at lunch. Okay, there's benefit to that. I guess you're saving some time and there's some reduction of red tape type of idea. But if you roll that up over at a corporate level, does that make the business any more efficient? Is it changing top or bottom line in any meaningful way? And it's probably not, I would say. Back to that idea around app side access, app side improve, app side transform, those are all beneficial. And the thing I just mentioned related to the PO approval is still beneficial, but that doesn't necessarily make the strategy beneficial. And that strategy should really be based on some more concrete metrics around, like we talked about before, like time, or it could be revenue growth. It could be something related to cost. It could be related to whatever those key metrics are for that organization that we try to develop with them in that area. And then the usability one is good. And it's good to know that people are using what you're building. And then trying to measure the ROI of a specific application then comes back to, what are we trying to be able to do with that? What are the core metrics? How do we define some baseline beforehand? And how do we look, a month or two down the road to see how that's changed? In our conference room app, we rolled that out, and they did some surveys to try to understand if meetings were starting faster, and they were. Like the time was cut in half at least. And then people who showed up late, they would, before the meeting started, they would take their phone, install the app for them. And so the next time that they weren't late, because you'd have everybody was there on time except for the people who weren't using the app, which is actually pretty cool. We've done other apps for say, store management and things like that, where there we're trying to be able to create visibility to specific metrics and users know how to act on those. And so we're watching those metrics to say, for the stores that have this application out, do we see meaningful change in those metrics? And if not, why are we not seeing that? And if we are, how do we expand that even more? So it has to come back to the drivers. It really does. It has to come back to what the overall objectives are within mobility, and not just transforming for transforming's sake, but what are the core things that we want to change within the organization.
Great. Let's just talk about our process for a little bit. We don't always start our ideation sessions with a day in the life process, but if you could just talk about how we will often get started with our strategy sessions.
For new clients that, I'll use an example, that an organization who's been dabbling within mobile but wants to be able to take this to a more structured and kind of measured approach. We do a lot with ideation, and we do a lot with trying to work within large organizations to identify where the major groups of benefit would start with, knowing that you have to start somewhere. And we try to make sure that we're very focused on A, the user group that we're going after, and B, the types of benefits that we're trying to drive within that group. You have to do a little bit more canvassing to identify where those target groups may be. So similar to what our conversation was before on the conference room idea, a lot of times we'll have some business driver discussions related to mobile with leadership groups and with some leaders of specific teams. We will do some canvassing. And so we'll have even short 1-hour conversations with different groups within an organization to determine, are they thinking about mobile applications? Where are they thinking about those? What type of transformation has occurred in the past? Are they a group that changes business process often? Or are they kind of rigid and structured with what they do? We look at the culture within the team. We look at the use of mobile devices and kind of where their people are and how much mobility fits into that kind of that profile of those user groups. And we try to understand what mobile ideas that they have. We try to bring things in from other industries or other groups that we've worked with similar organizations to say, well, you guys thinking about this and this, and build a small, ideation matrix is what we call it in each of those types of teams. And then looking back across those groups, usually there's some good alignment where we see there's big benefit here. It's a group that's ready for change and will embrace that and will work with us to be able to make those changes, and kind of lines up technically where we're not trying to change something that is so massive that it's a large project right off the bat where you have to really prove the ROI before you would get funding for something like that. And so we're trying to find those opportunities where we see that we can have wins. And I think those wins are important for any organization starting out, where when you start taking those steps in enterprise mobile and start thinking about those processes, to have some wins under the belt and to show real benefit. And those wins that create transformational change, those get talked about internally, and then you start seeing other groups come forward to say, hey, we have some things that are similar to this that we'd really like to do, and we'd like to be able to rethink these 1 or 3 business processes types of ideas. And so that's kind of how we start. And that's where we start from the business team perspective. And then from there, the next logical step is to take that group and those user ideas and kind of drill down on those a little bit more, start thinking about process change, and we build a prototype, as you know. So we're very much big proponents of doing prototyping very early in our process. So as soon as we start thinking and seeing some use case ideas and some benefit in there, we'll prototype those out in like a week and start having an application that a user group can download to their phone, click through, kind of get an idea of what those words on page really mean from a visual perspective. And then that usually spawns another round of thought and ideas, and kind of do that in a little bit more of an iterative fashion.
When we talk about generating those ideas, I've been on a few jobs where they've all been a little different, but usually it's the client that generates the bulk of the ideas. I know the indoor mapping app that we talked about was a little different in that the idea came from us, but it was spawned by an obvious problem. Is that generally the case, that it's usually the client that comes up with the bulk of the ideas and then we contribute, from our own particular expertise?
Yeah, I think the client typically knows where the challenges, like the big boulders, are for sure, right? They know strategically what are the major initiatives in the organization or within a group for the next year. They typically would say, these are the things that we're trying to get rid of, or maybe from a process change perspective, or major maybe IT systems that are changing the background that allow us to make different types of changes on the backs of that. And then there's always ideas that we bring in from, like we said, like from similar clients, maybe other manufacturing firms if it's a manufacturing client, things like that, or other industries that we see. Like we bring a lot of things from retail into banking and vice versa. Like obviously they're pretty close, but we come up with some different ideas there based on how we manage those locations and those stores and things like that. That's kind of the initial round. And the next piece is really you start asking why certain things. And unfortunately, you really have to understand how the organization works to understand where to ask the whys. And even though you might hear about a process in a conference room that sounds like it's ripe, when you start getting into it, you start realizing that you pick this up and 20 other things come with it. Maybe that's not the right place to start, or in the opposite way, that people never brought things forward because it just was so ingrained that they never thought about how to get rid of something. And so that's where I think our day in the life type of thing comes in as well, where like we have to see it. Like it's one thing to hear about it, but you really have to see where people are spending time and what they're doing in that prep situation, or what they're doing on site, or when they walk in somewhere, or where that effort is being managed. To just stop and say, why are you doing this? Or why does this have to happen? Or what are you getting prepared for? Or what materials do you need? Or whatever those types of things are, to understand what the root needs are there. And sometimes it's very difficult to see those unless you're literally standing in front of the person while they're doing them.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to get some more information about our day in the life process specifically, I know that Nitin did a podcast with me about it, and we did a webinar on it just recently. So there's a lot of material around that you can grab from our website. So we've got like 8 different kickstarts now that we offer. I think when I started, it was just 3 or 4. And one thing we talk about as a deliverable is a mobile roadmap. Can you just provide some more detail on how we build a mobile roadmap and what exactly a mobile roadmap is?
Yeah, so all the ideation that we just talked about, and the good ideas that come out of different business teams, and the stuff that we find at Day in the Lives, and we rank and stack those. So we try to initially go after ideas that obviously have benefit and big benefit, and we can tie those to specific drivers that we've identified, like time or other kind of financial or personnel metrics and things like that. We look at readiness. So what we talked about before was starting with groups that we think are going to embrace that change. And even if it's the same thing they do today on a mobile device, there's still a amount of change within that. And so we look at readiness to say, is this a user group and a set of individuals that will embrace this change? And honestly, it's a very personal type of thing, right? Just because we made something better doesn't mean anybody's going to use it, which I think sometimes get lost in prioritization, but something that we look at very heavily. And then we look at, like I said before, around the complexity or the effort involved in some of those types of things. And we rank and stack these ideas, and we kind of take those 3, sometimes 4 metrics, and we create this idea around a viability, and add those up to say, how viable is this idea at this location? Like you might have the same mobile idea at 5 different locations, or 5 different clients have totally different viability scores based on technical or based on organizational and use and other types of things, even if the idea is great. And so we use that kind of very personalized viability type thing to rank and stack those ideas from an idea perspective. And then the roadmap comes in where you then look at some of the more kind of mechanical aspects of things to say, so if we start in this group with this app idea, this person might do 50 things throughout the day. This only takes care of 7. So do we want to be able to have other app ideas that, or other use case ideas that came out of this matrix that might be lower on the viability score, but we want to bring them forward because we want to create a set of coherent processes for the user? Or do we jump to another user group to say, well, there's another really good idea that would be beneficial for a completely different team, and we want to build one app for them? And so there's this idea around, I can go solve one problem, but how do I take a lot of these small solutions of problems and create something that's very seamless for me as a user, and not just an IT group looking to plug holes in the dam type of idea? Back to another retailer, for their district team, they had about 75 processes that the district team would do every week. And so we built a roadmap through that to say, of those 75, 20 were done every day, and there's another 30 or so that are done once a week, and then there's another, whatever's left, 25, these are done once a month or once a quarter. And so we could kind of break that down to say, all right, we want to go after these daily items, and we want to make sure that day to day they can use their mobile devices and go after these benefits and all this great stuff knowing that at the end of the day, there's some nightly things that they have to do on a desktop back at their home or a laptop or whatever. Then we went after those, and then you go like, okay, so they can use this mobile device really to do what they need to do on a day-to-day basis, but once a month, they still need to log in and do quarterly reporting. And so we kind of looked at it from a process perspective, and then you start building a roadmap out to say, okay, how do we going to go execute on these, and how do these pieces fit together into creating a really cohesive experience for the end user?
Our business model is that we are able to deliver strategy, wireframes, designs, and a prototype in 2 weeks. And I've often wondered if some of our potential clients are maybe incredulous that we're able to do that and think that it must be sort of a too good to be true kind of scenario. Maybe if you could just explain how we're able to deliver so much so quickly and get it right as well.
I think on the strategy side, the important piece there is to recognize that even though what I just talked about, this viability score and organizational readiness and all this type of stuff, those things change very quickly. And a user group that might have some opposition to mobile or mobile solutions might be huge embracers in a very short period later. And so we try not to get all wrapped up around building a strategy for a year or something like that. We talk about like interviewing with different groups and things like that, try to understand where we want to kind of spend and focus some of our time. And once you get into that group, we try to do very high level, light touches of road mapping and strategy within those. Do those day in the lives, pick off the things that we know are going to be a huge benefit. Go work on those quickly to show that benefit and to get the users something that they can get them more excited. And then use that second piece after there's excitement there and they see some benefit and potential. Bring those folks back in, take another cut at that roadmap, and let it define something that we want to do next, or maybe the next 2 ideas or something like that. So trying to build something and say, hey, we're gonna sit around, we're gonna define the strategy, we're gonna execute it for a year. This is our 18-month strategy. It's really impossible. Not only because not just the technology changing, which has an impact on this, but more that the approach and the mindset of your user base will change very quickly once you're successful with it. And you'll start getting ideas that you would not have gotten the first time around. And even, if you're even executing a long mobile strategy that's multi-year, even you start bringing those individuals back in, you're still going to have new ideas that you might not have thought of 6 months ago. And so we try to do those strategies and those kind of roadmaps in a very quick fashion. It's usually plainly obvious once you start doing day in the lives, and once you start really identifying those based on drivers, it's really obvious where you want to spend time and effort. And to quickly prototype those, get those out to the end users, be able to do a strong implementation where you're trying to ensure that you have a well-functioning, well-navigating, elegant application for the end user, and then use that momentum to then go to your next one. So the answer to the question is, I don't think we've pioneered that in any sort of way. We've always had that approach in our work. I think it's a matter of knowing what you can change now and doing strong steps to be able to make that change here, and then using that learning and bringing that back in to readjust and to move. The only problem with that approach is that one area that it works against us is that typically in the organizations that we're working with, that's not the way their budgeting process works. It doesn't work where, hey, I need $50K to do this small app, and I might need $500,000 or I might not. Like, it usually doesn't work that way. Usually you're saying, for this year, these are the 6 things I want to go do, and so I need to go budget for these 6 things. We might still say we want to do 6 things, but we don't know what those 6 things are until we're through the third one. And so it doesn't really work very well with budgeting where there's ambiguity in direction. And we're very much around ambiguity and direction when it comes to looking at year-long strategies. We want to make sure that we're taking the right steps for those users, and then using that learning and redirecting to make sure we're going in the right direction. And so that's the only problem that faces some of the organizations we work with, is a lot of people want to know what's our mobile roadmap for the next 18 months. And that you can answer that question. I just don't know if it has any meat.
So there are 4 Propelics partners. Maybe some of you listening don't know this. And I'm just wondering, how did you guys all decide to take this particular approach to ideation and mobile strategy? And how has it evolved since the company was founded in 2011?
We always try to avoid massive strategy workshops and things like that. Like we've competed with organizations who put out like a 6-month strategy roadmap to say we're going to spend 6 months and define a strategy, like I said. But that's never been our approach. We've always tried to make the work that we do very iterative. We've always worked in newer technologies and how those new technologies impact organizations. And so that mix has always made us build smaller targeted approaches that iterate versus trying to define something that we're making guesses based on how the user base is going to react or the success of specific initiatives and things like that. We've been very lucky where I don't think we've had any applications that we've rolled out that there's been no use in any sort of sense. Like we've always built applications that the users go, this is it. Like this is exactly what we wanted, even though we didn't really know it at the time. And now I can see where we could go to this and this and this, which is great that we want to have our clients take and run with. It's just the way that we've worked. I think in terms of how it's changed, we always had the same kind of ideation approach and things like that. We do a lot more from a cross-industry perspective than we thought we would. We kind of started thinking that every user would be clamoring for mobility. And no matter what we put in front of them, they'd be like, yes, this is what we want and do more. And that's not really the case, actually. It does require the right thought and the right benefit for use. And even a lot of things that we see, like this idea around apps at access type of thing, there's a lot of those sitting on the shelf, I'm sure. And maybe people who have listening to this might have a couple of those. But just because I can have access to it and I use it once, or it's there if I need to get something, doesn't mean it's something that's really worthwhile maintaining or growing and other types of things. That's actually different than what we thought. We thought that really kind of going out the bat that anything that provided this data in a mobile form would be beneficial. And really, I think the fact that it's on mobile, that newness has worn off. So the fact that it's there and available to me is not enough. It really needs to be something that is truly beneficial to me and something that cuts a significant amount of either time or effort out of what I do. And those are the apps that we've seen obviously have a much larger impact than other ones.
So Eric, thanks for hopping on and joining me for this today.
Thanks, Stephen. It was fun.
I just want to say if anybody has any questions for us or any suggestions for future podcasts, just throw us an email or give us a tweet or log it on our Facebook page, and we'll try to put that together. All right, everybody, stay tuned for the next episode of Device Squad, the mobile enterprise.
The what? What is it?
Device Squad, the enterprise mobility podcast from Propelics. All right, bye-bye, everybody.